Welcome, fight fans, to Deep Waters only on ProBox TV, your boxing channel, where we take a deep dive into some of the most important topics in the world of boxing. George DeMatteis alongside the champs in studio, Paulie Malignaggi and Chris Algieri. Oh, we got a great show for you because we're going to talk about the impact that Amazon could have on the boxing world. And we are joined by BoxingScene.com reporter Lance Pugmire, who is writing a story about the potential impact of Amazon on boxing. Lance, what do you have for us when it comes to Amazon and the potential for boxing?
Yeah, with Prime Video starting with the Tszyu fight on March 30th, we want to look at exactly what that potential is at this hour. I mean, there's so much that can still possibly happen beyond March 30th. There's great plans such as, licensed non-pay-per-view fights that Prime Video will stage on its network. And then additionally, the slew of pay-per-views that we will see on this new format that has just such an unbelievable reach, not only through this country, but internationally. So looking at the potential of that, talking to the people involved, talking to people in the industry, we will have a fuller story tomorrow on Boxing Scene, so please check it out.
Looking forward to reading that article from Lance Pugmire on BoxingScene.com about the impact of Amazon on professional boxing. We're also going to be joined by Showtime Sean Porter as well. Can't wait to hear his thoughts on this subject. But let's hear from Paulie and Chris. All right, Paulie, what about the impact? I mean, people are talking about this could be the best thing for boxing in a very long time.
Well, here's the thing, right? Boxing is the kind of business where the purists don't want change. You hate change. When you first hear about change, it kind of kills you. You want to keep it the way it is. There was the time when, boxing went from network television to HBO and Showtime, and there was the purists that were complaining about that. But then by the time of the Showtime and HBO era ended, a lot of us were mourning that, you know? So I think there was that mourning process that was going on, and now comes the excitement factor, the excitement value of thinking, well, what could Amazon do? What could these new platforms, this new streaming style platform do? Well, I'll tell you what, Amazon has this big reach, and Lance Pugmire just made a great point too. We were thinking that it's just, it's going to be pay-per-views. This is going to be all pay-per-view. What kind of model is this going to be? No. Listen, Prime has your subscription money, which is a regular subscription, just like HBO and Showtime were a subscription channel. And so you had non-pay-per-view fights on HBO and Showtime. You will have non-pay-per-view fights on Amazon as well. So that will be just part of your subscription. And then, of course, the genre of the pay-per-view is always going to be there as well for the bigger fights and the bigger events. But nonetheless, I mean, the reach Amazon has, I need people to understand this. The reach Amazon has, there's 115 million or so subscribers just in the United States alone. Right. Amazon is in 25 countries, I believe. Now, the Zone is in a lot more countries, but there's a lot less subscribers. I mean, if you think about the reach and the potential Amazon has, the Zone is essentially a pimple on an elephant's ass if you're going to compare it to the reach and how big Amazon is. But the only question is, will PBC make the matches necessary to make this storm brew the way it should be?
All right, let's hear from Sean Porter to talk about the impact that Amazon will have. Before we get to Chris's studio, let's get Sean Porter. Sean, what do you think about the impact that Amazon could have on professional boxing?
Yeah, I'm happy to see Paulie excited about this. It seems, at least it seems like he's excited about it. And I look at it the exact same way that Mr. Malignaggi looks at it. The reach beyond just boxing fans is something that boxing has needed for a very long time. Don't forget, I'm a part of the beginning of the PBC era. I understood quite clearly why we were going to network television, because there were more eyes on network television watching a commercial that is promoting boxing than there would be people watching Showtime or HBO seeing a commercial about a boxing match that they already know about. That's the model here, is to reach people who don't know about boxing. Man, how do you do that? Well, you were trying to do it with two really big names. Obviously, Keith Thurman, we know what he's done or hasn't done in the past, and of course, Tszyu coming up. But that was an action-packed, exciting boxing match. I thought it was picture perfect to launch PBC on Amazon. Nonetheless, I think when you have when you are following NFL, when you're following NCAA, when you're following even the NBA now has games on Prime when you're following all those with commercials and promos and things of that nature, there's only one thing you can do is capitalize on it. And to Paulie's point, Only way you capitalize on it is making the boxing events that people want to see. And that's what I expect PBC to actually do this year. I felt like the way they ended last year on Showtime, those were footprints showing us it was a foreshadowing of what was to come on Prime. So I don't see us turning back away from what boxing accomplished last year. And I think they're going to capitalize on it. And I love the fact that it's going to be on Prime.
All right, Chris, what do you make of the impact of Amazon Prime or Amazon on boxing?
Call me crazy, but I've always been excited about this. And we spoke about it on shows months ago when this first got announced. And this is just the way the world works. Things change. The world is changing. The way media and entertainment is distributed has changed. We are no longer in a premium movie channel network that's going to provide us with these big fights. That's gone. That's for dinosaurs. Guys, the new age is streaming. And now this platform is the biggest streaming platform in the world. Boxing deserves this kind of coverage, deserves these kinds of eyes. Sean, to your point, what PBC has always done is been trying to get back to the old school where everyone saw fights. They were on regular TV. You just tune in. Well, Prime's kind of like regular TV now. I know so many people who don't have any kind of cable anymore. They just have streaming platforms. And most people have Prime. We talked about the reach that it has. Now, so that's going to allow a lot of these young fighters to have a platform that was never available to them before this. Not since the 80s have we had this much boxing available for primetime eyes for... I mean, it's not free, obviously. You have to pay for a Prime subscription. But back in the day, you had to pay for cable. So it's just a changing of the times. And I think this is just a new era in the world of entertainment and distribution of media in this way. And boxing at the forefront of it. So let's go, man. I'm excited about this whole thing.
And I'm one of those guys, man. I'm you talk about one of those guys that doesn't like change. I'm the guy that hates change most of the time.
Well, we spoke about this. You were upset about it. I like it.
I'm like the old grandfather who gets mad when he sees everything change around him. But then you start to come around because you start to see, okay, well, the positive is boxing's not going away. There's something being done for boxing. So what is being done for boxing? Then you look at it, and you start to see the things you don't really understand. Like, I was the guy, when streaming came around, I didn't like that either, because I'm like, bro, I like channel surfing. I like going through my channels on my cable and figuring out what I want to watch. I don't want to know what I'm going to watch before I turn on the TV. Sometimes I want to channel surf. That's gone with no cable, right? Well, but again, you get used to it, and then all of a sudden you see the benefits of the new style, the new mode, and that's where Sean comes in. Sean, you're looking very angelic tonight with that cross on your chest. I mean, it's sparkling in a way. It's very angelic, mind you. But I'll say this.
Believe it.
I'll say this. No, literally, in that light, there's like a sparkle off that cross.
Why do you think I ain't moved? Why do you think I ain't moved?
But having said that, it's something when I heard what Blaine said today, I had heard it maybe just earlier today, that these fights are not all going to be pay-per-view. So it's basically, a lot of them are also just for the price of your subscription. Bro, that's HBO and Showtime all over again. That's no different.
Exactly.
That's the price of your subscription, and then you get your pay-per-view as well. So, but this has more reach. Amazon has a bigger reach. So if done right, and again, there's always the if. It's got to be done right. PBC has the roster. Will the fights get made? If the fights get made with the roster they have, I mean, dude, you got a big potential.
Wednesday Night Fights. On the next Wednesday Night Fights, March 27th, join us for the main event. Puerto Rico's Joseph Blessed Hands Adorno takes on Nicholas the Axeman Walters from Jamaica. Live from the ProBox Event Center in Plant City. Get your tickets at proboxtv.com or take your chances at the door. Wednesday Night Fights.
Ooh, that's the start of a great fight week. Wednesday Night Fights live on ProBox TV. Get it on YouTube as well, on your boxing channel. All right, let's talk about this pay-per-view March 30th, which will be fascinating. PBC got 4 title fights, but the first two fights are free to Amazon Prime subscribers. So looking forward to seeing those fights. And you know what? They're pretty good fights as well. Let's take a look at those fights and the matchup. The 2 that are free for Amazon Prime members, and then the pay-per-view for everyone, with, of course, the headliner being Tszyu versus Sebastian Fundora, 6 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Ciudad de Mexico. I got to make sure I say shout out all my Mexican fans out there. And then 3 p.m. Pacific on the PBC pay-per-view, and should be some great fights there. All right, Sean, I want to start with you here because these 4 title fights for the pay-per-view and then 2 really good fights for free for Amazon Prime members. Is this card, especially the pay-per-view part of it, is it worthy of pay-per-view?
I thought as soon as I saw the card, I thought it was worthy of pay-per-view. I heard people kind of complaining, especially when when PBC goes to Amazon and you're like, well, I'm already paying for the subscription. You're telling me now you're charging me a pay-per-view. I honestly thought that I'm not surprised to hear Lance Pugmire say that there's going to be a lot of boxing that comes with your subscription. I actually thought that this first match was going to come with the subscription. Once I heard it was pay-per-view, I said, hey, we got Keith Thurman, we got Tim Tszyu, that makes sense. The undercard right there, we got Cruz versus Romero, that makes sense. I said, all right, you got to pay for this one, no biggie. Still, nonetheless, I think Fondora sticking in for coming in for Keith Thurman. I think that fight still makes sense for this to be a pay-per-view. I think it's gonna be an exciting night. I saw like way on the lower part of the undercard there, you had Lara, and I said, well, I don't think Lara is probably what people would consider to be pay-per-view worthy, which is why they more than likely had him a little bit lower on the schedule, even though he's probably got more experience than a lot of those fighters.
Champ, I believe Lara is on the pay-per-view because he's fighting Zarafa. That matchup itself.
And that is a title fight.
matchup, and that's a WBA middleweight title. The middleweight division is a little bit on like a lull right now, so people don't hear a lot about it. But the main WBA world title is on the line there with Lara and Zarafa. And Zarafa himself, not the most skilled guy, but world class. He's a rough and tumble kind of guy, and I think that's a good style clash and style matchup because you have Lara, who's a slick boxer, but he's aging, and Zarafa, who is not as good of a boxer, but he's got that energy and he's got that roughhouse style. So I think even that matchup is still a good matchup at a good time for them in their careers, as far as it for the possibility of being an even fight.
Yeah, so I think overall, I mean, again, you're offering title fights. When people don't know the name, but they see the jury, it makes them interested in what's going on, So I think all the way top to bottom, PBC has done the right thing. Either you know the name or you see that there's some jury in the ring and it gets you intrigued and makes you interested in what's going to happen. So overall, though, yeah, I think it's pay-per-view worthy.
Yeah, and if you really look at it, I mean, this is what PBC did last year. They made heavy cards. Top to bottom, the cards are really good. Throughout the year last year, we had a great year of boxing last year, let's be honest. But it's nice to see the transition into this year, and we're still pulling a fan-friendly card, especially a boxing head card. If you really know boxing, you look at this card like, man, I like a lot of these fights, just like you said, Sean. But I think a lot of other people now with this program and this platform are going to be able to see how deep these cards are, and you're going to get introduced to some fighters that maybe some of the regular casuals wouldn't. The two free fights. You've got Elijah Garcia who had a breakout win on the Canelo undercard last fight when he fought Charlo. Then we have Bohocek, who actually is still fighting because he looked like he was. He's fighting Brian Mendoza, who has fought both guys in the main event. Both Fandora, who he scored a come from behind KO, and then he also fought Tim Tszyu in Tim's last fight. So he's now fighting Bohocek, which we look like Bohocek is like, oh man, this poor guy is not gonna. He's getting really pushed to the side, but he's still gonna get on the card, and I think it's actually a benefit that it's gonna be free for him. Yeah. He's a very fun fighter to watch. I watched a bunch of his fights, and so is Mendoza. Yeah. But also, Mendoza's coming in on very last minute. Obviously, Bohocek was training for this. But I think it's a great opportunity, and those are two really good fights to open up the card on the quote-unquote free version of the show.
And Mendoza's been training out here. He's actually been moving around with Tim Tszyu. So, yeah, I mean, somehow they man, it's Keith falling out was like, it's like, damn, Keith, get it together, man. I want to see you in the ring. But the other side of that is they were able to really just save this card, because I really don't think you had to save the card. Everybody was like in line, and then when you stick in Brian Mendoza, who's been training and he stays in the gym, one of the few guys you can say can be ready on the spot of at the drop of a dime, even though he's at world championship level. A lot of fighters at world championship level, they don't train until there's something coming. So he's been in the gym, and I actually think he's going to push Bohocek. Bohocek is kind of get you or you get me. And so I think that one's going to be an exciting one, because Bohocek's going to be going for it, and Mendoza might set him up for something big. We'll see what happens.
And guys, listen, we got to think about the main event too. This is now a unification fight. Yeah. We got two world titles on the line. That wasn't the case prior. With I think WBO wasn't willing to sanction the Keith Thurman fight because he's been so inactive in the last couple of years. So that title was not on the line. Now, because Fundora, who has been active and is a ranked fighter, is allowed to actually compete for the WBO title, Tszyu title, but also was supposed to be fighting for the WBC belt against Bohocek on the undercard. Right. So they moved that up. WBC goes, okay, cool, we can make this a title fight too. So now we got 2 titles on the line in the main event. The card, honestly, from a boxing perspective, it did get better. No offense to Keith Thurman.
Yeah, it was good.
But it's created a card that matters more now because we've got a unification opportunity.
I think Keith found out what it's like to be in the old man club. You know,
yeah.
when you come back, he'd been out for so long.
Man.
He'd been out for so long that I think he thought he could come back and train as hard as he used to. And when you realize that when you hit a certain age, you train as hard as you used to, you're gonna get injured, man. Yeah. I tell you, I was not injury prone aside from my hands. I always had chronic hand injuries, but I was not injury prone. And then all of a sudden, I got to my mid-30s, and it was like one stupid injury after another. And I think, Keith, welcome to the old man club. If you're going to keep continuing, you're going to have to train smarter, not harder, as Floyd used to say. And then, believe me, you learn that with these kind of injuries, unfortunately.
Age is a funny thing, man.
Paulie,
it's insidious. It creeps up on you. My last 6 fights, I think I was hurt the whole time. Ooh. And also, Keith is a very explosive guy. Yeah. Those tendons don't react the same way as you get a little bit older.
Yeah. Chan, what are you saying?
I was going to say, I was just saying that was the argument that you and I had. You're like, what happens when he feels that age, when he feels like wakes up and just doesn't want to do it? I say, nah, that's not going to happen.
Not with Keith. That's not going to happen.
It happened again.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing. Keith hadn't fought in so long. The last time he was training for a fight, he was still young enough to have that kind of explosiveness, man. You guys, that I mean, it's only a couple of years, right? But I mean, those couple of years are the key years. Yeah. Those are the key factor years where your training style has to change if you're going to survive those training camps.
Is this Amazon situation better for boxing or the boxers? Or both. It could be both.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's better for both in that way. Listen, for the boxers, you're always looking for a platform to be seen, right? So if one platform goes, you need a platform just as big or maybe even bigger to be able to apply your craft on. And then I think Amazon fills that void very nicely here once you start to really look into the nitty-gritty and look into the numbers and look into the possibilities that Amazon brings you. Of course, like I said earlier, you need to make the right matchups, the right fights. And I think this particular card, we've just been talking about it top to bottom. Listen, how many pay-per-views have we looked at where boxing especially starts to sucker you for your money? They give you a nice big pay-per-view fight, and then the undercard is pitiful. You know what I mean? Like fighters you never heard of and so on and so forth. I think boxing's starting to take a page out of the UFC playbook in that a lot of fights on a pay-per-view, and they're all going to be good. I mean, this is a very, very good card, and we're also giving you the 2 free fights, or the 2 fights with your Amazon subscription, of course, that are also good fights. I think that could get your mouth watering. You know, the people that don't want to get the pay-per-view, they may watch those fights and say, you know what, I'm hooked. I'm going to grab that pay-per-view, and I think that's why they probably do give you the 2 free fights, and those will be good fights as well. But even the pay-per-view, I mean, I think Julio Cesar Martinez is on that card too. I saw, right? Against Cordova. That's a good fight in and of itself. And we talked about Lara Zarafa. You talked about Rolly and Cruz, and then the main event with Tszyu and Fundora. I don't think any of those 4 are fights that I look at and say, man, I'll snack around and talk to my friends during that fight, and then I'll get excited for the next one. I don't look at any of those fights as that one. There were old pay-per-views where I would look at the card, even pay-per-views that I worked. You know, there were a lot of Floyd pay-per-views, which on the card was kind of bad, and then there was just Floyd. You know, and I look at it now, and this whole pay-per-view, once the show starts, I mean, you're on, bro. I mean, you're on watching it. It's one fight after another that you're really looking forward to, and I really feel like there's a lot of potential there. And if the fights live up to the hype, because of course sometimes fights don't, but if the fights live up to the hype, I think this is a good start for PBC on Amazon.
Yeah, Chris, what do you make of the question there? Is it better for boxers or boxing, or a little bit of both?
Well, it's certainly good for the boxers because, especially PBC, they have such a huge stable, and all those fighters are contracted a certain amount of bouts per year. And if there's not a platform for them, it's going to be very difficult for PBC to live up to those expectations. So the boxers, absolutely. Now, I'm going to say it can be good for boxing, as long as what you just said, Champ, happens. If these fights turn out to be as good as they look like they are on paper, and we get an exciting night of fights, it's going to be great for boxing. This is a new platform. There's going to be a lot of eyes on this because of the novelty of it. If they go out there and actually perform, and it goes off without a hitch, and we have great fights after great fight after great fight, it's going to literally look like a new era. And I think it will be, because we're going. If this is how we open, and we're opening with a deep card with true understanding to the sweet science of the sport in terms of these matchups, then yeah, if this is what we have to look forward to, people are going to get excited. and they're not going to worry about the subscription. They're not going to worry about paying for the pay-per-view in the next time because they do know that on the back end there are some them fights that are going to be licensed that are you're not going to have to pay on top of your subscription. So yeah, I do think there's an opportunity here for this to be really big for boxing.
And it's going to be interesting to see what happens. All right, Sean, let's talk about Tszyu a little bit because there's been a little bit of doubt about his resume coming into this fight here against Sebastian Fundora. Fundora, at least physically, might be the most imposing of his opponents so far. What do you make of Tszyu, his chances against Fundora, and people maybe criticizing his resume a little bit heading into that fight?
Yeah, I mean, I was with my dad just yesterday, and he was criticizing the resume. I'm going with Fundora because he's more battle tested, is what my dad said. I said, Dad, Fundora is a good boxer, but against a Tszyu is a lot of things that Sebastian either does or does not do that puts him in harm's way. So I think that this is really not the fight, excuse me, that's going to show us whether or not Tim, whether or not Tim is I guess that quote unquote world championship level that everybody is still questioning whether or not he's at. Reason being is because Fundora is very one-dimensional. Fundora is right there to be hit. And yes, Fundora is very tough as well, but he doesn't present any sort of puzzle for Tim. And that's what I liked about the fight with Keith. I thought at the end of the day, even if Tim won, we would see him literally have to solve some puzzles and fight through some things to get the win. I don't see these same puzzles against Fundora. I think what I've seen from Tim close up and personal, having gone over to Australia to commentate him 3 times last year, he's very determined. He works extremely hard. He gets prepared for each fight that he has to have. And that's another thing too. People, well, how can he make the switch so quick from fighting someone like Keith to now fighting somebody like Fundora? I think Fundora is he's the easier puzzle to get ready for. He's straight up and down, and there's not a wide range of offense or defense coming from him. So I don't even think the last minute change is gonna disrupt Tszyu. And I think this is Tszyu's fight to win.
Well, I'll say this though: we can criticize Tszyu's resume, but he's ascending. And also, I'll say this: if you can beat Fundora, it puts you on a certain level of world class. Fundora is a world class fighter. He has his hiccups. He has his there's certainly discrepancies inside of his style that make him beatable. For one, he's very hittable. If I take this remote control and throw it this way, I might hit him. You know what I mean? Like, he's not very defensively apt, but
we want this fight to happen. Please.
Yeah, but he's very attack minded, and he's very exciting. And if you can't handle that offense, he will hurt you and get you out of there. I just feel like Tim is also a guy who is a cerebral mind in there as well, so he's not just a guy who hits hard and has this and has all this hype behind him. This guy still comes from the Eastern European school of boxing. You know how I feel about that. There's a lot of psychology with that. And this guy's in Australia, but he comes from an Eastern European family, trained in that Eastern European style. And his style inside the ring, he's a menace in there, and I think he's going to go very far. I tweeted years ago when I first saw him against Jeff Horn. I said, this guy's going to go down as the best fighter in the history of Australia.
Ooh.
Yeah,
Quickly, Chris.
I'm going to be quick on this. I really like Tszyu, and I think he's going to be around for a while. Like to what you said, Champ. I mean, his fundamentals, his doggedness, his effort, the way that you said, Sean, excuse me. I think with Tszyu is a guy who's going to be around for a while. And listen, you might critique his resume, but this was supposed to be a resume builder fight. He was supposed to have Keith Thurman. And with a win over Keith Thurman, people would have been like, the reason Keith was brought in, let's be honest, Sean. I know he's your guy. I know you're picking him, but the reason he was brought in was for this to be the Tszyu, hello to America, and when he gets to fight a name who hasn't been in the ring in 3 years. So that's really what this fight was all about. So this was a resume building opportunity for Tszyu, which it still is, because Fundora is another ranked guy. But like I said, I'm very high on Tszyu. I think we're going to be dealing with him for quite some time.
March 30th pay-per-view, 3 days after live Wednesday night fights on ProBox TV, your boxing channel. That does it for Deep Waters. Take care, everyone.